Welcome to the Conversations in a Café podcast, where we're going to talk about pop culture, current events, politics, and everything in between. I'm one of your hosts, Lamont, aka ITHL123 on pretty much every social media platform. And our other hosts on the panel tonight are
Hello, Gerald, aka JFro90 on all platforms.
Hello, James Magruder, aka Petty Mason, 24/7 on all platforms.
I'm Andre Asante on Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube.
And tonight, our special guest is Dr. Andrew Greene, who I think is one of the best MJ aficionados. In fact, do you want us to refer to you as an MJ fan or an MJ advocate?
Certainly, I am, more than just a casual Michael Jackson fan. I have been a lifetime fan, probably since around the age of 11 is when the fandom really kicked in. Prior to then, it was just, okay, I knew who Michael was and I was scared of Thriller, right? But I do also consider myself an advocate for Michael Jackson, just in general for, false allegations, especially in the Black community.
I just want to say you've done an incredible job of correcting the lies, misinformation, and allegations against Michael. Anyone listening to this and want to learn the truth, the 100% truth about Michael Jackson, please follow Andrew on Twitter at Andrew Greene with an E on the end, 864. Again, that's at Andrew Greene, 864. Okay, let's get into tonight's topic. Okay, tonight we're going to discuss the R. Kelly trial, our opinions on the verdict, and the media's attempts to make comparisons between Michael Jackson and R. Kelly. And before we get started, let me say we are a pro-Michael Jackson podcast with the receipts. And we are not bashing Michael on this podcast. In fact, we're going to discuss the facts of the allegations against Michael and how it's completely unfair to compare Michael and R. Kelly. But first, what is everyone's opinions on R. Kelly and the verdict?
Yeah, I'm very pleased with it. I'm very pleased with the verdict. This has been a long time coming. My thought, even back when the tape was new, I saw the tape when I was 12. I was younger than the girl on the tape, but it felt wrong, and it felt wrong then. And I was always disturbed by the fact that the community, and I mean the community of the school I was at, and then my family, and like the Black culture and me in general, was obsessed with his fetish of water sports versus the fact that is obviously a child, that is obviously a kid, and it always confused me what took so long. And even though I've become a master, I give it to him where he's the reason I become a master at separating the art from the artist, where it's like I could always appreciate the music of his I love, but I always had now let's take him out someone that erase his ass stuff. So long time coming, but that's where I'm at with it. Yeah.
I have to say, I'm happy for the victims. Well, I can't say it's a good feeling for me. I feel sad for everybody in this situation, including him. I know it sounds a little crazy, but, he had abuse of his own growing up. And, sometimes the abuse becomes the abusers. Yeah. And for me, I people that don't know, I work at a brain injury program. So I see abusees and abusers that have come and gone through the program. So it's like I have a different perspective when it comes to that. So I'm very happy for them. The victims, they get some sort of, what is the word I'm looking for? Some sort of relief that he will be locked away. I'm just sad over the whole situation. I don't feel right. The music will always be tainted for me. I feel sad for Aaliyah. Feel like she couldn't say anything. Yeah, I don't have a good feeling about it. It's like I don't feel good at him going away, but I'm happy for the victims. It's just all overall sad.
I just hate that people have an idea of what a pedophile is or a predator, and that R. Kelly didn't fit that idea for them, so it took so long for people to even really recognize what's going on. It took national attention from something on TV and all of that. Like when we had video evidence, we've had years of evidence, we've had people who've known forever, and because of different power dynamics and things in place, they couldn't say anything, and if they did, nobody would listen to them and they were discredited. I mean, it really speaks to the issue with all of us that it took till 2021 for him to see any type of consequences.
Up until like maybe 2 months ago, there was a male that was abused. And then all of a sudden, it's a little weird, the timing for me, that it took a male to be accuse R. Kelly of molesting him or whatever for it to be a closed case.
And during Monday's testimony, for the first time, we heard from a man in R. Kelly's sex trafficking case who claims that the R&B singer sexually abused him when he was underage.
It's a whole other conversation we got to get into.
Yeah.
Yes, but I just had to bring that up because I'm like, wait a minute.
I'm glad you did.
And that speaks to the differences in how our culture view abuse as it relates to boys and girls and things of that nature. It's a whole
Black
other
women,
conversation, especially Black women. Yeah. Andrew, and how do you feel about it?
Hey, well, I want to echo what you guys have said. There is some disappointment. There's some sadness. I also agree with the verdict. Now, I do have some concerns about how the verdict was reached. And I want to talk about R. Kelly being prosecuted under, I consider, a racist law. It just so happens to be here in this case, it applied to him. That law, of course, is the Mann Act. I think he was convicted of 7. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong, could be 7 or 8 counts under the Mann Act. As we know, the Mann Act is also known as the White Slave Traffic Act. They tried to prosecute Michael Jackson under the Mann Act in 2003, but then, the state attorney declined to even prosecute Jackson for that act. But ultimately speaking, the act was first used against boxing champion Jack Johnson. And we learned that Jack Johnson had that act incited or what have you, just for, guess what, having consensual sexual relations with a white woman.
2 years earlier, a new federal law had gone into effect. The Mann Act was named for its sponsor, Illinois Republican Congressman James Robert Mann. It barred the transportation of women in interstate or foreign commerce for the purpose of prostitution or debauchery. The Mann Act was intended to stop the luring of young women into prostitution, not private relationships between consenting adults. But officials of the Justice Department saw in it their chance to destroy Jack Johnson.
So, I do have my concerns, that the Mann Act was invoked for this particular trial. But although, like I said, it probably applied, right? And we have all reached our conclusions that R. Kelly was probably guilty based off of, the facts of the case, things that we know about it. Also, I have a problem with R. Kelly probably being convicted in public opinion. Prior to his trial, did he really get a fair shot? I'm sure that the evidence that was presented in court was overwhelming. So, I'm sure that based off the evidence alone, R. Kelly was probably guilty. But were there anyone sitting on that jury already that wasn't convinced that he wasn't guilty? I have my concerns, but I definitely agree with the verdict.
We're going to circle back to that, and someone remind me of that, because I want to circle back to that, the Mann Act, and in general about the Black community's feelings about especially Black men being prosecuted, because I think that's a topic that is rarely discussed, about how we feel as a community seeing not our heroes, because I don't want to say that for someone thinks I'm calling R. Kelly a hero, but the figures that we look up to in the community being prosecuted, and how we might feel that they are guilty of their crimes, but at the same time we understand the dynamic of race in this country and how that plays into the prosecution of individuals. So I want to circle back to that. But
that's a very good point. Yeah, very good.
But you did bring up Michael, and that's also one of the main things that we wanted to discuss tonight. The attempts by the media, their attempts to make a comparison between Michael and R. Kelly. So could you tell our viewers, as an advocate for Michael, what are the differences between Michael and the R. Kelly case, and why are they different and completely should not be mentioned in the same sentence?
Good question. Well, first, let me say that while for some it is tempting to lump Michael Jackson in the same conversation with R. Kelly, I think doing so exposes how very little these people actually know about Michael Jackson's case, or R. Kelly's, or perhaps even both, right? And the allegations surrounding Jackson largely started to fade over the past decade for a reason. Unlike Kelly's cases, where the more you looked at Kelly's cases, he starts to look, a little guilty. And the more you looked at Jackson's allegations, the more vindicated, the more exonerated Jackson becomes. For example, if you don't mind, allow me to highlight some of the main differences between the two cases, okay?
Cool.
So, R. Kelly is allegedly on tape committing some of these acts of which he's accused. That is evidence. There's no such evidence of anything tangible that you can put your hands on and say this is evidence against Michael Jackson. In fact, in the Jackson's case, the FBI meticulously combed through 16 computer hard drives and VHS tapes looking for evidence of child pornography that either included Michael Jackson himself or excluded him. Any version of child pornography is illegal, whether or not if you're in it or not. And guess what they found? Nothing. They found absolutely nothing. R. Kelly married a minor. We all know that when Aaliyah was 15, he married Aaliyah, and that's a provable fact. Michael Jackson married 2 grown-ass women in his lifetime. R. Kelly had 11 victims and accusers testifying against him in the court of law. Jackson had 20 plus witnesses testifying for him. And the funny thing about that is that some of the witnesses that the prosecution called, it wasn't just witnesses on the defense that was testified for him, but some of the other witnesses that the prosecution called, like Debbie Rowe and even June Chandler, mother of the 1993 accuser, they effectively assisted the defense more than they actually did the prosecution. And only one accuser testified against Jackson in court. So that's another difference. There is no evidence Kelly was blackmailed by any of his accusers at all. None of his accusers first approached Kelly under the table, to try to get an under the table transaction, right? I won't go public with this if you give me, $5,000, or I just do a number out there.
Yeah.
But there's just no evidence that R. Kelly was actually blackmailed. There's ample amounts of evidence that Jackson was blackmailed, by who I deemed his real accuser in 1993, Evan Chandler, which is the then minor's father, along with a couple of his employees as well. But Kelly's history, his background is full of violent allegations, physical, emotional, sexual. He's even accused of being invasive and, invading privacy. Michael Jackson is not known to be that same violent person. His history is full of things like being the most charitable entertainer in history, spending countless of hours in hospitals and charities and shit like that.
And I've always said if the trial in 2003, if that was made public for us to view, like the whole Leaving Neverland thing would have happened because people would have saw Wade on stand being very strong in the fact that nothing happened to him. So now you have him saying that, and then you come back to him saying years later that all of this happened to him. It wouldn't have had the same impact because people would have actually seen him, denied it and things of that nature.
Right. I just feel like that was a great point that you made of the benefit that the later 2 accusers got from the 2003 trial not being available for everyone to see, because they were able to even manipulate that finding for their, mockumentary, like I like to call it, and spin it a certain way where in reality it was such a mess. And I love the flashbacks of correspondence, really it doesn't look good for the accuser. It was a mess from beginning to end. And the public as a whole missed out on that.
Exactly.
Missed out on what could have been the public exoneration of Michael Jackson.
I think it goes back to what Andrew said about the public opinion. People run with headlines. So when you hear any little bit of information, especially with somebody like Michael Jackson, who has sort of a mystery around him, you grasp onto that first thing you get and you fill in the blank and you run with it. So when you hear the first hint of anything, you're like, well, I don't get him. So yeah, that must explain it. I'm going to go with this. Like Lamont said, had the trial been public, I think people would have laughed at the prosecution if they could have heard all the testimony and all the things they tried to throw at him that just had no foundation. That's the issue. People don't. I mean, that's why I'm glad you're here to tell people this, because people don't know the details of everything. They hear things and then they misremember them, and they're like, "Yeah, that seems about right. I don't get Michael Jackson. This must be it." And I feel like even with James and Wade, I do feel like there are victims who, because of their trauma, they're too scared when they're younger, or even when they get older. Maybe if they have a relationship with the predator, they're too scared, or, you know, there's a myriad of reasons. Sometimes they just don't remember correctly, all types of things. You know, trauma is a tricky thing. But that's not what's happening with them. It's clearly not what's happening with them. And I think them trying to paint themselves that way makes a mockery out of people's real pain who are really trying to do this when they're just scam artists who are trying to act like real victims. And that's really sick.
Yeah, we're going to drag, well, I shouldn't say drag because somebody might take offense to that. But we're going to discuss Wade and James later, and we're going to bring the receipts as well. But my next question back to Andrew. Critics have said Michael Jackson and R. Kelly paid to make their accusers go away. And thanks to the Me Too era, abusers like R. Kelly simply couldn't use money to escape the consequences of their actions. And we know that's not true when it comes to Michael. So could you break down the settlement that happened in 1993 and basically how Michael was forced to settle because of the laws that were on the books at the time?
Yeah, sure. I'll cover this. And allow me to clarify up front, though, okay? Like, I mean, I want to add something before we actually start talking about the legal settlements. If Michael Jackson had been guilty, he would have paid Evan Chandler in August of 1993. Now, this is before the 1994 settlement. He would have paid Evan Chandler in August of 1993 when Evan first demanded money. And, you know, he threatened him. Evan was willing to accept just $1 million at that point, right? And he would not go public with his allegations. And $1 million to Michael at that point in time, that was chump change. I mean, no reasonable thinking person who has said that Jackson was guilty, no one can even explain why he would not pay this chump change to keep the case out of public domain and to prevent the investigation had he been, you know, guilty.
Let me cut in real quick because I want to make sure that's very clear. Evan Chandler, before he even went to the police, he was trying to get a settlement out of Michael. Before any of that happened, he was trying to get a settlement out of Michael Jackson. And Michael refused to pay him. And then that started the whole process. Okay, go ahead, Andrew.
Yeah, that's correct. Michael didn't pay him because Michael knew he was innocent, and he felt like, I mean, and he was a little naive at that point, I believe. Like he felt like justice would prevail. Like if you take a look at the speech that he would later give at, what was it, the NAACP Image Awards, I think it was, of 1993, he just gave a speech that pretty much got a standing ovation there. You know, like he really did feel like justice was going to prevail.
None of these goals is more meaningful for me at this time in my life than the notion that everyone is presumed to be innocent. Everyone is presumed to be innocent and totally innocent until they are charged with a crime and then convicted by a jury of their peers. I never really took the time to understand the importance of that ideal until now, until I became the victim of false allegations and the willingness of others to believe and exploit the worst before they have had the chance to hear the truth. Because not only am I presumed to be innocent, I am innocent.
However, as it turns out, justice did not and it could not prevail because the two DAs refused to close the criminal case even after they realized the photos of Jackson's genitalia contradicted Chandler's description. And on top of that, the judge refused to delay the civil case and allow the criminal case to move forward in a move that arguably, I believe, trampled on Jackson's constitutional rights and civil liberties by denying him a right to a fair trial. Really, it was that point where Jackson's back was up against the wall. So he had no choice but to take the civil case out of the equation by settling, right? It's important to note as well, the judge also allowed the DA full access to the civil discoveries, right? This is equivalent to an American football team providing their entire playbook to their opponent right before the Super Bowl game.
Exactly. Yep. And I want to make sure that's very clear as well. Evan Chandler and his lawyers filed a civil suit before criminal charges could even be brought against Michael. That in itself shows you Evan's motivation, money. Also, as you said, a civil case moving forward would give prosecutors in the criminal investigation access to Michael's whole defense, meaning the DA, Tom Sneddon, and we're going to leave links in the description box about him because, yeah, there's a lot that happened that people don't know about. Anyway, the DA, Tom Sneddon, could have simply studied Michael's defense strategy in the civil case and then formed his whole case in the criminal trial around that.
Yeah, no, very good. Very good. And, by that time, Jackson didn't see how justice could fairly take place at this point, right? And understandably so. I think it's important to also know that this settlement did not prevent the Chandlers from moving forward with the criminal case. They were allowed to proceed with putting their quote unquote abuser in jail if they wanted to, but they didn't. Janet Jackson once said, and I'm going to paraphrase this, okay? So Janet Jackson once said, she said, if someone had done to your child what Michael was accused of, do you take that money and run, or do you seek justice to the fullest extent that you can?
Now, if this really went on, do you think a father would accept money, that would make it okay, that would make everything all right? I mean, it doesn't make any sense. I know that if that were my son, I'm sorry. I don't care if you gave me $1 billion. I want to see you either behind bars or dead for the rest of your life for doing that to my son or my daughter. It's crazy. The guy was after money is what he wanted.
R. Kelly, on the other hand, he was not forced to protect his legal defense at any point. But R. Kelly, what a lot of people don't know, he still settled 3 times. He made 3 settlements, first being in 1996 with Tiffany Hawkins, who sued R. Kelly for personal injuries and emotional distress after she alleged that she was in a relationship with Kelly for 3 years. She says that they began having sex in 1991. In 1991, she was only 15 years old at the time, where R. Kelly was 24 years old. And the relationship ended when she turned 18. The case was settled in 1998. Now, the other 2 cases that were settled were both settled in 2002. Patrice Jones alleged that R. Kelly impregnated her when she was underage and that she was forced to have an abortion and have proof of that quote-unquote abortion. Whereas Montina Woods also sued Kelly, alleging that he videotaped them having sex without her knowledge. If you guys are old enough to remember, this was the tape that was circulating through the bootleggers collection or what have you. And I think the name of the tape was R. Kelly's Triple X. And R. Kelly settled both of these cases out of court, paying an undisclosed sum in return for non-disclosure agreements. Nonetheless, though, Jackson's settlement was forced. R. Kelly's was not. That's the biggest difference here, right?
Is it true that Evan Chandler did not want to bring authorities or media attention to the initial threats? That was really all his lawyer's advice, and that he really did not want the attention of threatening Michael with that.
That's correct. There is so much evidence that points towards that. Evan wanted money, and he wanted money the easiest way that he could get it. The easiest way that he can get it, the most time-effective way, was to avoid going to court. It was also, just to try to fear monger Jackson into settling or what have you, right? You are correct in your assumptions that he didn't want to go to court. There is evidence that points towards that, by the way.
Yeah, and let's go ahead and discuss that tape between Evan and David. And also I want to point out that conversation that we're about to talk about took place before Evan alleges that Jordan told him about the alleged abuse. And this conversation takes place, I believe it's sometime in August of 1993. Is that correct?
The conversation between David Shorts and Evan Chandler, who, by the way, David Shorts, that was June Chandler's then husband, and June Chandler was Evan's ex-wife at the time. So, but that conversation actually took place on July 8th of 1993.
Okay, thank you for the correction. It took place in July of 1993. It's before Evan even claims that Jordan told him about the alleged abuse. So if that's the case, the conversation that you will hear is him literally planning to extort Michael Jackson. And he says in that tape, if I don't get what I want, everyone will be destroyed. So basically he's saying, I want money. And if I don't get the money, I'm going to put this out there.
This man is going to be humiliated beyond belief. He will not believe it. He will not believe what's going to happen to him. Beyond his worst nightmares. Sell one more record. This attorney I found, I interviewed several, and I picked the nastiest son of a bitch I could find. Once I make that phone call, this guy is just going to destroy everybody in sight. Any devious, nasty, cruel way that he can do it. And I've given him full authority to do that. It'll be a massacre if I don't get what I want. If I go through with this, I win big time. I will get everything I want, and they will be destroyed forever. They will be destroyed. June is going to lose Jordy. She will have no right to ever see him again. Yeah. That's a fact, Dave. That's what's going to happen. Michael's career will be over. Does that help Jordy? Michael's career will be over. And does that help Jordy? That's irrelevant to me.
The portion of the tape that exists on the internet is a small portion of the entire tape. In fact, there are 2 different tapes that were recorded on 2 different days, but there are transcripts, both the tapes out there. You can read the transcripts. Now, in its entirety, I think the transcripts are more incriminating against Evan Chandler. I think they both prove even more that Evan was only attempting to extort Jackson and his son Jordan. Well, he was just an expendable casualty in his grand plan driven by greed, if you really want to know the truth.
Yeah.
I want to also emphasize what you just said as well, that this phone call recorded prior to Evan manipulating Jordan to fabricate claims of abuse took place on July 8th, 1993. But why did this call take place? Well, the day before, on July 7th, Evan was leaving heated messages on June's answering machine. That's right, I said answering machine, not voicemail. Those of us who are old enough to know what answering machine is, we know what one is. But it was her answering machine that had these heated and alleged threatening messages towards June. Right. And at that point, they were hoping to catch Evan. They were hoping to catch some of his erratic behavior and possible threats and prove extortion even. Dave decided to go ahead and record the conversation. So the recording captures Evan threatening to destroy Jackson with help of a plot he carefully prepared and with people who are, quote unquote, on standby waiting for a phone call from Evan, which is essentially the green light to go ahead and put the plan into motion, right? So during this conversation, David Shorts asked Evan, do you think he's fucking him? So he's asking Evan, do you think Michael Jackson is fucking him? Jordan. Okay, so he asked Evan that. And Evan replied, I don't know. I have no idea. Again, it's important to note that no complaint or indication of molestation has come from Jordan himself, as you made clear. There are other things I would like to mention about the call as well, okay? So Evan flip-flops during the entire call between I know he harmed my son and I will destroy him. And I just want to talk and let's see what we can find a solution. Evan is also on this tape whining about MJ not returning his phone calls anymore. Why would you want phone calls from someone who you believe is harming your son and for someone you claim you want to destroy, right?
Exactly.
So Jordan would end up parroting some of Evan's talking points on these calls almost verbatim, which can only mean one thing, that he coached Jordan later on to actually make the allegations that he did, which I think we all agree that happened there. Evan Chandler said that he will get everything he wants and he will, quote unquote, win big. If he merely wanted to take custody of Jordan, what was everything he was referring to? And what was the win big part that he was referring to? Chandler was already demanding $20 million from Jackson to focus on screenwriting and, to go ahead and start winding down his practice, his dental practice that he had at that time. And there's also evidence that even prior to all this, that Evan Chandler was asking Michael Jackson to build another wing onto his house or what have you. So it was just this bizarre request that Jackson was like, no. Also, on these calls, Evan ends up calling Jordan a user. Okay, a user. What father who is genuinely concerned about their son, who believes that their son is molested, who's going to call their son a user at that point? Right?
That's something I didn't even know. He called Jordan a user. His own son, Jordan was like 12, 13 years old at that time.
Yeah. Jordan was probably, I think he was going on 13 because when 1994 came along, he was 13. He was that 13-year-old accuser accusing Michael, right? So yeah, he was 12, 13. You're right.
So he's Evan Chandler is on this tape saying that his son is a user. He's saying that Jordan is using Michael, or Jordan is using someone else.
Oh, well, the way he positions it on the phone call when you're reading the transcripts is that he's referring to Jordan as a user in general. Oh, he's just getting what he wants out of Michael like he does me or whatever, that type of thing.
Wow.
So nonetheless, what father does that, right? But Evan certainly did. Now, some may say, what does this call even prove? Well, let's talk about a few of those things that I think it definitely proves, okay? So it proves, one, that he was pissed off because Jackson didn't talk to him anymore, right? So
and that's also very important, because the whole thing started because Evan wanted Michael to fund his film, because he had written
Robin Hood Man in Tights.
Yeah,
Men in Tights.
He wrote that film, or he produced it.
He got a credit in it. He got I think it's a screenwriting credit. So he got a screenwriting credit.
Yeah, so he basically wanted to further his career. So he was pestering Michael about funding that, and Michael turned it down. And that, along with the fact, and also Michael, of course, Michael and Jordan hung out, but Michael was close with the whole family. Michael was close with June, David, and because June has a daughter as well, right?
Lily. He was close to Jordan's sister, Lily.
So basically, he was close to the whole family, with the exception of Evan, and Evan was jealous about that. So that's how it all started. And also, I want to add that Michael was close to numerous families. He just didn't get close to this family. He was close to numerous families, and
famous ones too, who he stayed with. Emmanuel Lewis, he stayed with them. His whole family for a long time, especially when he got burned on the top of his head. He stayed at his house. Nobody really knew that. So, I mean, they act like they're the only family, and that's just what he did as a person who couldn't be with a lot of people in public.
That's right. And, you hit on my next point, something else it proves is that Evan was just jealous, right? This phone call also proves that he wanted to win big. Win big by what? Accusing MJ. I think it also proved he already had a plan to accuse him when his son did not even accuse him at that point. We all know that Jordan's quote unquote accusations did not come until, later on. On the date that these phone calls were recorded, Jordan's accusations, they had not yet materialized.
So another thing that these tapes prove as well is that Evan's thoughts and words were essentially the same language that Jordan would later parrot as his own allegations. Let's compare what Evan says on tape to what Jordan would later say in an abuse interview. So Evan says, Michael is using his age and his experience and his money and his power to great advantage to Jordy. He could be the same person without the power and the money, and they wouldn't even be talking to him. Okay, so that's what Evan says on these tapes. Now, Jordan's own words would later be, he's a grown-up and he's using his experience of his age and manipulating and coercing younger people who don't have as much experience as him and don't have the ability to say no to someone powerful like that. He's using his power, his experience, his age, his overwhelmingness to get what he wants, okay? So those are Jordan words. Do you see the similarities there? Now tell me what 13-year-old would use language like that or even think that way. And in this exact same interview, by the way, this abuse interview where Jordan makes the comment that I just mentioned, well, he kind of contradicts himself because he would say that Michael Jackson was like any regular person and that he was not in awe of Michael, right? So clearly, it was not his idea that he was powerful or overwhelming and use his age and experience and power to coerce him to do, anything. So,
And I think it also proves that Evan was without a shadow of a doubt a narcissist. And this is a deeper conversation that, can be had or what have you, the type of, behavior like Wade Robeson, in my opinion, that narcissists, take on. And Evan, I think this conversation or these tapes also prove that Evan was careful not to tell anything to Dave that would make him believe he was planning to accuse MJ of molestation. And Evan admitted that he was instructed to actually say whatever he was saying and how he was saying it. He was instructed by his lawyers, is what he said, and was already careful and conscious of what he was claiming. So the tape also further proves Evan was very concerned about Evan. And his supposed concern about Jordan was just posturing. It was nothing more than that. You don't call your son a user if you indeed care about him.
Yeah.
And I think also this tape proves Evan was a violent and unstable individual, because on the tape, Evan is threatening to kill his then wife, because he wasn't married to June at the time. He had another wife named Natalie, I think is her name. And he said that he would kill her if he finds out that she cheated. And an important note here is he had previously beaten Natalie up while she was pregnant. And then later on, she would divorce him, like 2 years, maybe 3 years after this. And I think finally, this tape proves, I do believe that this tape proves, in my opinion, that Evan was extorting MJ. In fact, he ended up successfully extorting MJ. So a lot of revelations there and a lot to unpack.
Well, I didn't even know about him threatening to kill his wife. I didn't even know about that. Wow. That's insane. Okay, well, he is insane anyway.
Again, something the media does not report. They only tell you Michael Jackson has a Ferris wheel. They don't tell you about this guy's violent history.
Exactly. Exactly.
What also gets swept under the rug, and that's so glaring, is the fact that after the Chandlers versus Michael was finished, Jordan Chandler emancipated himself also from abuse from his father tried to kill him, and that magically gets left out whenever even that name is brought up, even when that situation is brought up, that Evan Chandler had some serious real issues that don't get any attention at all. So I'm really happy. I'm learning from this too, and that it's furthering that, and it's like we got to get this information out there. So I'm happy to be a part of that.
That's a
I
good
want
point.
to add to what he just said about Chandler having some real issues, and because he did. So much so that in, the divorce papers with his then wife that we were just talking about, Natalie, what she would claim is that her children, and it's unclear if she meant Jordan as well, but she would claim that her children was in need of some serious evaluation after having even lived with that man.
Wow.
So, this is what is on record in divorce court, if you will. I just want to point out, this isn't just, let's bash Evan's session or whatever. No, this is real life stuff. And also later on, around the trial, I think it was right after trial, I think he did try to kill Jordan because he literally threw a weight, like a weight,
Yep.
like you're lifting, at Jordan's head. So,
Yep.
but that's a whole different bucket of worms.
And
Wow.
Can I add some follow up to all of that? We do need to address that people are going to say it doesn't look right. MJ was somebody who didn't think of things the same way that we did. And also you have to consider he's been famous for 40 of the 50 years of his life. And fame, we always talk about celebrities being out of touch, but fame is like a different world when everything operates everything operates just completely differently for you. The rules are different. Everything you do is different. How you live is different. So yeah, if you're somebody who's deeply spiritual, you're reading and you're just not part of the world that the rest of us get to experience, you're not thinking the way that everybody else does. You don't think of everything the same dirty way that everybody does. And the thing people don't realize is MJ was somebody who had fans around him all the time, not just kids, but fans in general. So people think, oh, he hung around kids. Yeah, he hung around everybody who was nice to him, anybody who seemed genuine. I mean, people from 12 to 40 to 50. That was the thing with him. And to the whole thing of hush money with MJ and R. Kelly, what people don't also think about, R. Kelly and most of these creeps that we hear about, they try to sweep all of that under the rug. They try to make sure anything incriminating against them doesn't get to the public. They try to put out that fire as quickly as possible. Michael Jackson has addressed everything publicly. He's been transparent. I mean, he shared everything. He even let a certain British so-called journalist visit and see how he lives. I mean, this is not somebody who has something to hide who would do that kind of thing. This isn't somebody who's trying to just make sure you don't have those thoughts in your mind. He would go on the news and issue videos and not just a tweet here or something from his publicist or pop up at a church and make a vague statement about everything's going to be okay. He would publicly get up and be like, this is what they're saying. This is what they're doing. This is why it's not right. This is why I'm innocent. And if you just look at the patterns of, like I say, all the other people who have had very damning evidence against them, they don't move and behave the way that he did.
Exactly. And I think that's what led to the 2003 allegations, because Michael refused to change who he was in his attempts to help children because he knew he was innocent and that the allegations were nothing but extortion. Also, as you pointed out, Michael's massive celebrity and the fact that he had been famous since 10 years old, it gave him a different view of the world. I think it's very fair to say that he was naive, too trusting, and only tried to see the good in people. But speaking of 2003, let's end part one here. And in part two, we'll clear up a lot of the lies and misinformation regarding the 2005 trial. Thank you for tuning in to the Conversations in a Cafe podcast. In part two, we will have more in-depth discussion about the allegations against Michael Jackson and the media's attempts to suppress the truth. Be part of the conversation. Follow us on all social media platforms, including Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and SoundCloud. Also, comment below this video and let us know your opinions on part one of this discussion. Thank you for listening.